Anonymous with this because it's pretty embarrassing, and also putting my name out there tied to this is likely a horrible idea. There was a Craigslist ad posted in 2017 by a guy named Jackson. He was advertising free lodging for a girl who would watch over his house and clean, basically an au pair or nanny without having to watch any kids. I'll just be honest that I kinda lost the will to do a lot when I was 21. I had zero relationship with my parents or sister, and I only had a handful of friends who I could trust. I dropped out of college my first year, part of the reason my parents hated me for a while, and I was working a dead-end job at a vape shop. I like to just refer to this period as my attitude era, and when I saw Jackson's Craigslist ad, it really caught my attention. It had like 10 pictures of his house. It looked like a modest middle-class house, slightly old-fashioned honestly, but I was into that. The pictures weren't what got my attention the most though. It was the fact that free living was offered for a nanny-type position. No background check required. I didn't even ask my family or friends their opinion on this post before I just decided to reply to it. Like I said, I wasn't exactly talking to my parents or sister at the time anyway. I texted the number on the ad, and this Jackson guy responded within a few minutes. I expressed interest in the listing and just asked some basic questions. He had an answer to everything that honestly made me feel more interested, but he asked pretty early on in the conversation what my gender was. When I said female, it almost seemed as though his responses got longer. I honestly didn't care. Most people tend to prefer having a female housekeeper or nanny anyway. I was still interested. Anything that got me out of my parents' house. He said he wouldn't be home most of the time during the day, but he wanted to come home to a clean house, and that he also wouldn't mind coming home to a cooked meal from time to time after work. Honestly, I was cool with that too. If it meant free housing, hell yeah, I'll cook some food. Beats standing in the wage cage at the vape shop. Plus, he also said he'd pay for the groceries. It was sounding almost too good to be true. He suggested I come by later that day to check the place out and see if it's a fit. I said okay. A few hours later, I was on my way in my crappy little Civic to the guy's house. It was in a perfectly normal side of town. The block actually seemed pretty calm and peaceful. The neighboring houses had flowers and decorations outside, suggesting the neighbors were normal too. Good start so far. I went to ring the bell, and when the door opened, I was greeted by a man larger and honestly older than I had pictured. I had pictured this regular 45-year-old dad-looking guy. Instead, it was a man maybe 60 years old, 6 feet tall, gray beard, and a little overweight. He greeted me with a smile and went in for a hug even though we had just met, and honestly, the amount that he laughed made me feel pretty at ease. He showed me around the house. It was a 2-story house. The first floor was your basic kitchen, dining room, and living room setup. Then the upstairs was 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. He only showed me the guest room that I'd be using and the bathroom upstairs though. The other doors stayed closed. He said if I ever needed to use the office across the hall, I was welcome to. Down the hall was his room and another room that he didn't explain. I was surprised to hear there was only 1 bathroom. Then there was the basement. He said it was unfinished and that he doesn't use it for anything other than working out and doing laundry. That was the end of the tour. He didn't show me the backyard that day. I told him I wanted the job, and he told me I was hired. 2 days later, I came back with my stuff. I told my parents I got an apartment when they asked where I was going. I didn't explain anything more. The first night there was when I noticed the cameras. No, they weren't hidden. At least, I don't think they were supposed to be. They were just small black cameras mounted up in the corners of the living room and the kitchen. It made perfectly normal sense to me. He was letting basically a stranger live in his house. It wasn't that crazy that he'd want some security. Still, I wish he had mentioned it. That was the first time I felt even slightly weird about the situation. If you can't tell, I really wanted this to work out. That night when I went to bed, I noticed how much noisier the house felt than when we toured it. I could hear the wood floors creaking every once in a while. At one point, I swear I heard what sounded like a door closing somewhere downstairs. I checked my phone, and it was around 1:30 in the morning. Again, I came up with a reason for this in my head. When you're laying in silence trying to sleep, you pick up on more sounds than you would when occupied by something during the day. Plus, every old house makes sounds like that. The next morning, he was already gone like he said he would be. He had left a note on the counter with a list of things he wanted done. It was normal stuff. He wanted me to do his laundry, vacuum the floors, wipe down the kitchen, and stuff like that. I tried to just focus on the fact that I wasn't standing behind a vape counter all day anymore. I did his laundry first, then I cleaned the floors and wiped everything down. After that, I went back upstairs and started setting up the bedroom more like my own space. I unpacked my clothes, set up my laptop on a small desk, and put a few personal things around just to make it feel less temporary. I remember thinking maybe this could actually work out. I was actually being positive. After I finished everything, I just relaxed for a while and watched YouTube videos on my laptop. Not hearing my parents yelling downstairs or having one of them burst through my bedroom door barking orders at me was a breath of fresh air. The first week actually went pretty normal. At night when he got home, we would talk a little, like about basic stuff. It never really got deep. He asked about where I grew up, what I wanted to do eventually, stuff like that. I cooked dinner a few nights in a row, and he seemed to appreciate it. I started thinking maybe I just overreacted about the cameras and the weird feeling, but it didn't all stay happy and peachy. One night, I made pasta with chicken and some vegetables. I tried my best, but I'm not some housewife-type star chef. I was some young, angsty goth girl. When he got home, he looked tired and irritated. He took one bite and his whole face changed. He said it tasted bland. I said sorry and offered to add some seasoning or make something else, but he just kind of snapped. He said something like if I was going to be living there for free, the least I could do was learn how to cook something edible. He pushed the plate away and stood up. Then he told me to clean up the mess I made in his kitchen before he walked away toward his bedroom. It caught me completely off guard. It wasn't even just what he said, it was how fast his personality seemed to change. He had seemed so easygoing before that. I cleaned everything up quietly and hoped that he had just had a bad day and nothing more. Everyone has bad days. The next morning, I actually apologized to him. I didn't even really think I did anything wrong, but I wanted to keep things smooth. I told him I was sorry about dinner and I'd try harder. He just laughed like it was nothing. Then he said something that made everything weird. He said maybe I could make it up to him by cleaning the house in my underwear that day. He said it with a smile like it was supposed to be funny. I remember just kind of freezing for a second because I didn't know how to respond. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that, to put it lightly. He just laughed again and said he was joking and told me to relax, and then he went to bed. I remember standing there after he left feeling really unsettled. It was the first time I really thought maybe there was something off about him beyond just being moody. That was the first time I texted one of my close friends about what was going on. I told her about the living situation and what he said. She immediately told me I was insane for staying there. She told me to leave as soon as possible. I didn't want to though. As weird as it was getting, I still felt like I had more control over my life there than I did living with my parents. Going back there felt like failing again. The next Monday, I was leaving the house to go buy groceries with some money he had left for me. As I was driving, a car behind me started laying on the horn. I thought I did something wrong driving, but it kept following me. I pulled over because I started getting scared that something was really wrong. The car pulled up behind me and a girl got out. She looked around my age. She walked up to my window and asked if I was living at that house. When I said yes, she immediately told me I needed to stay away from that man. Apparently, Jackson wasn't even his real name. She said she was the girl who had the same arrangement before me. She told me she eventually realized he had cameras watching her constantly. She said she started noticing he knew things he shouldn't know. She said when she tried to leave, he made it very difficult and kept asking questions about where she was going and when she was coming back. Then she told me one night she woke up and saw him leaving her bedroom. That part made me physically sick. Then she told me the worst part. She said he didn't even have a job. She said he lied about going to work every day, and she eventually realized he was still somewhere inside the house most days. I just sat there trying to process it. Every little weird thing suddenly started making sense. I asked her how I could leave without causing problems. She told me to act completely normal, to start slowly taking important things out so he wouldn't notice. She said when I leave, I should make it look like I was just running errands, and she told me not to confront him and not to let him know I knew anything. After she left, I just sat in my car for a few minutes trying to calm down before going back. When I walked back into the house, it felt completely different. I felt like I was being watched even more than before. That night, I checked the room carefully like she suggested. She was right. After a few minutes of looking around, I noticed something small on the top shelf of the closet. It was pushed away into the corner. When I moved a box, I saw a tiny black lens pointing outward through a small drilled hole. I just slowly put the box back like I didn't see it. Needless to say, I didn't sleep at all that night. I looked at the darkness of the room, wondering what I'd gotten myself into, and honestly, I'm glad I didn't fall asleep that night, because at some random crazy hour in the night, I heard my door creak open, and I flipped to my side and looked at the door. It was Jackson. He noticed me look at him, and he apologized for waking me and closed the door. What the actual was that weirdo planning on doing? I needed to get out of there. The next morning, I started my plan. Every day, I would bring one small bag of stuff to my car. Just normal things and nothing obvious. 3 days later, I left while he was at work, and I never came back. Though if what that girl told me were true, who knows where he actually was? Maybe in the house somewhere. He texted me later asking where I was. I told him I decided to move back home and thanked him for the opportunity. He kept texting asking why and saying I should at least come talk to him in person. I never responded again. About a week later, I noticed something that still bothers me. I got an email notification saying someone had tried to log into one of my old accounts. The login attempt was from the same town his house was in. I changed everything after that. I don't know what his real intentions were, and honestly, I don't want to know. Nothing technically happened to me, but I really believe if I stayed longer, something eventually would have. If you ever see deals like that offering free housing from strangers online, just remember, nothing like that is ever really free.